mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
It's Tuesday, April 11th. This is Africa 54. A South African court is deciding whether Zimbabweans living in the country will be allowed to stay or face deportation. Will unprecedented felony charges against former U.S. President Donald Trump inject new uncertainties into the 2024 presidential race? Fasting is a time-honored way to show respect during periods of a religious observance. But is it healthy? All that and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. A South African court is deciding Tuesday whether tens of thousands of Zimbabweans living in the country will be allowed to stay or face deportation. In 2009, the South African government introduced Zimbabwe exemption permits, known in short as ZEP, to legalize Zimbabwean nationals living and working in the country. But authorities have stopped renewing the permits and announced a June deadline for Zimbabweans to either get a critical skills permit or leave the country. The political and socio-economic problems in Zimbabwe have driven many of its nationals to seek refuge and better opportunities in South Africa. Tuso Kumalo reports from Johannesburg.
We are here at the Pretoria High Court in Pretoria in South Africa. This is where the case of Helen Suzman, where the organization is challenging the termination of permits for 178,000 Zimbabweans that has been ordered by the Department of Home Affairs here. The main argument for the Helen Suzman Foundation, they are saying these Zimbabweans were not informed about this decision, so it cannot be right that it's carried out. The hearing is virtual, but this is what is happening here. Earlier on, we spoke to a representative of the Helen Suzman Foundation about their position on this court case. Let's hear what she had to say.
And you must remember, many of these people, like I said, have children. Some of those children have never been to Zimbabwe. They don't even know what that's like. All they've ever known is South Africa and the country we have here.
And behind me, as you can see, there are members of Operation Tutula, Sisonke People's Movement, and other organizations that are opposed to these permits being extended. So they are saying these permits should be terminated so that these people go back home, so that they can take over whatever the jobs they are doing. And let's listen to what some of them had to say about this.
The population of this country on its own is too much. And, you know, we want people to go back to their respective countries to go and fix their own issues as much as we are doing here.
Even if they are in this country, that legally so, we are saying because the minister is enforcing the law, that law should be respected.
That thing must be stopped. Anyone want to come to the country must come to do. Maybe if you to do a job, must come to do a job, the skill we don't have. If you come to study, must come to study, not people to just come to the country. That time there was a problem in Zimbabwe, no problem in Zimbabwe now.
Whether these Zimbabweans go or they stay, the ball is now in the courts of the full bench of judges that are hearing this case. Tuso Kumalo for VOA News in Pretoria.
Now to Somalia, where United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres visited Tuesday and appealed for massive international support for East African nation as it battles a devastating drought and grinding Islamist insurgency. Guterres held a press conference in Mogadishu with President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. He described his trip as a visit of solidarity. Somalia is in the grip of a calamitous drought that has driven many to the brink of famine, while the government is also engaged in a major offensive against the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab Islamist militant group. Guterres spoke about the issues facing Somalia.
Somalia contributes with 0.003% to the emissions that cause climate change. Although Somalia makes virtually no contribution to climate change, the Somalis are among the greatest victims. Nearly 5 million people are experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. And of course, rising prices make matters worse. So I call on donors and I call on the international community to step up their support, to urgently fund the 2023 humanitarian response plan, which is currently just 15% funded. The Somali people deserve the solidarity of the international community and deserve it to prevent malnutrition and displacement, to save lives, to avert famine, but also to be able to launch a new process of stabilization and development in the country and to build up its capacities to fight Shabab with even more efficiency than in the recent past.
While famine thresholds have not been reached in Somalia, the United Nations says about half its population will need humanitarian assistance this year, with over 8 million affected by the drought. For more discussion on UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' visit to Mogadishu and a country plagued by armed conflict and climate disasters, I'm joined in the studio by VOA Somali reporter Falastin Iman. Hello, Falastin. You've been covering this story since Guterres arrived in your home country of Somalia. What would you say are the main takeaways from his visit to the country?
His visit was a bit casual, but as he mentioned himself, it was a tradition to visit the Muslim countries during this month, holy month of Ramadan, and fast with them, which he did now while he was in Somalia. And Secretary General, he also talked about the famine in the region, especially in Somalia, and he talked about the climate change that Somalia almost contributes zero, and still they are the victims of the climate change. He mentioned that the plan of humanitarian response has only 15% the money they supposed to do and help Somali people and in general the region. So he appealed the international community to help Somalia, and he said this is the urgent and Somalia need humanitarian assistance in order to save the lives of the innocent people. We also talk about the stabilization plan of Somalia. As you know, the Somali government is at war with Al-Shabaab, and they liberated a huge area that needed a stabilization plan and humanitarian assistance. So he mentioned that, and the other thing he talked about was Somalia is missing the 5th rain season, and that is a problem. So past year, Somalia was in a brink of the famine, and still, although it's a little bit affected, still there is that.
You mentioned the security issues, and we did hear him talk about that as well. And we know that previously President Mahmoud has requested regional leaders to help. What are you learning from this request? Have they heeded his call to assist in terms of security measures for Somalia?
Yeah, last week they had a meeting in Mogadishu. The members of the frontline states, which is the Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti, they all contribute in the African peacekeepers in Somalia. I think Ethiopia now they preparing their troops in the border with Somalia. Kenya also is taking their time to get ready on this. So the second phase of the war against Al-Shabaab already started some places, but still, and the frontline states are expected to join the second phase of the war against Al-Shabaab, because there is in southern Somalia that where is the stronghold of Al-Shabaab, and that's where the government needs help mostly. So the second phase will start soon. Some places it already started. So this will be a huge success for the region if they win this war.
Thank you so much, Falastin, for your insight. Falastin Iman is a VOA Somali reporter. Kenyan President William Ruto says the government will not borrow money to pay salaries. His remarks come amid threats from government workers to boycott work until they are paid. Most county government workers say they have not been paid for the last 3 months, the longest period county government workers have gone without pay. Regional governors are pressing the National Treasury to release the money and avoid crippling the country. Like many other countries in the Eastern Horn of Africa, Kenya has been stricken by worst drought in 4 decades. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund spring meetings are ongoing in Washington with an ambitious reform and fundraising agenda likely to be overshadowed by concerns over high inflation, rising geopolitical tension and financial stability. VOA's Peter Clotty spoke with the Zambian Finance Minister Situmbeko Musokotwane about monetary issues facing his country.
The first expectation is that right now, priority number 1 for Zambia is to push for the issue of the debt relief for Zambia to be completed. That's priority number 1. This is so because as long as the debt issue remains unresolved, uncertainties remain in the economy in terms of investment, in terms of people who participate in our local financial markets. So this is causing uncertainty, and we need to get the matter resolved. So in coming here, we are talking to executive directors of various countries, especially those with the biggest influence at the IMF and the World Bank, to plead with them. I know they've been assisting a lot, but to plead with them just to keep on pushing and get this matter resolved.
So currently, what would you say is the economic outlook in Zambia, looking at the debt situation? How challenging does it make the overhang of this debt issue?
The economy is doing reasonably well. For this year, 2023, we expect the growth to be just over 4%. Which is not bad. Inflation is just under 10% for more than 20% sometime last year. But where we have challenges is the issue of jobs. There are people waiting to get this matter resolved so that they can come and invest into our mining, into our agriculture, into manufacturing, tourism, and so forth. So we need the debt to be resolved so that we begin to make a mark on employment, especially for the youth.
Mr. Finance Minister, talking about the debt situation, recently in Lusaka, your capital, the U.S. ambassador and the Chinese ambassador made a statement about Zambia's $14 billion debt. What does this mean for Zambia and for these two countries to saying they'll put aside their differences to help?
The statement by the two ambassadors is very important because China is a creditor country to Zambia, okay, but also has been donating. The Chinese have made a lot of donations to Zambia. America similarly supports us a lot, especially in the area of health. So when they come together and put their issues aside and say, let's work together to get Zambia out of the debt crisis, we are extremely grateful for those. We are extremely grateful for that for that event.
Zambian Finance Minister Situmbeko Musokotwane speaking to VOA's Peter Clotty. A handful of Ethiopians from Tigray are protesting in the front of the World Bank and IMF, where the 2023 spring meetings are taking place, calling attention to the ongoing conflict in the country. The government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front have since resolved the outstanding issues through the peace process. Meanwhile, another hot topic is debt forgiveness, particularly for low-income and middle-income countries. For more, VOA's Paul Ndiho joins us live via Skype from here in Washington. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther.
First,
how are you?
I couldn't hear you prior because the noise over there. What are they protesting about? Tell us, bring us up to speed with that first.
Of course, if you live in the Washington, D.C. area, this is not unusual. You have a lot of Ethiopians who live in the D.C. metro area. And these people here are some of the people who are disgruntled with what's going on back home. They are here to protest or to call attention to the IMF, the World Bank, because there is no better time than this one to address the concerns back home. Maybe from our perspective, let me get somebody who is one of the organizers to talk to us. Okay, tell us your name. Tell us your name. Okay, I don't think it's ready. We can go. Please go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Okay, tell us your name. Hi. No, look in the camera over there. How are you doing today? My name is we're here because by the IMF Ethiopia will be here today, and you'll try to get funding, obviously. And we know that he is a part of the genocidal regime. He's part of the delegation of the Zambia regime. It's a Romo expansion that only favors Romos. Okay, wait a minute. Since then, there's been a peace that has been going on, a peace process that was broken by the African Union, and they have since resolved those outstanding issues. How come you are accusing the regime of maybe trying to manipulate the Oromo?
Okay, Paul, I think, Paul, we're not hearing much of what is going on. If you can hear me, Paul. Paul, okay. I've lost Paul. Sorry for that. Africa 54, Paul Ndiho right there at the IMF headquarters here in Washington. Still to come, we learn more about the different methods of fasting. Stay with us. In other news, Cameroon's economy minister says the nation is working to relaunch talks with the U.S. to end its suspension from the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, or AGOA initiative, which grants qualifying African countries tariff-free access to the U.S. market. Former U.S. President Donald Trump suspended Cameroon from the program in the late 2019 over human rights violations. At least 2 people were killed Monday by an explosion in Bahir Dar, the capital of Ethiopia's Amhara region, which has been convulsed by days of protests against the integration of local security forces into the national police and army. It was not clear what caused the explosion or whether it was linked to the protests. An Malian journalist who vanished following a press conference he organized last week has been found safe and sound, according to a crisis group that's set up by colleagues after his disappearance. Aliou Touré is now home safe and sound. The group did not explain the circumstances under which Touré was located. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been arraigned on 34 felony charges, including being accused of falsifying New York business records, to conceal his role in paying hush money to an adult film actress before the 2016 election. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara looks at how the unprecedented charges could inject fresh uncertainties in the 2024 presidential race.
Never in American history has a former president faced criminal charges, much less one who is attempting another run for the White House.
It's an insult to our country as the world is already laughing at us.
Donald Trump was charged this week with falsifying New York business records to conceal his role in paying hush money to an adult film actress before the 2016 election. In the weeks since the announcement of the indictment, Trump raked in $12 million in campaign donations, suggesting the criminal charges may be helpful to him, at least in the short term.
It really creates an aura of victimhood around him, which is something that Republicans have lately made a hallmark of their party and a hallmark of their electoral strategy.
After his indictment, polls showed Trump widening his lead over his likely Republican challenger, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Should he become the Republican nominee, in November 2024, Trump will likely face President Joe Biden, again, just like in 2020, which could mean good news for Biden, as it likely would galvanize the Democratic base and most independent voters.
Biden is the kind of candidate who isn't going to generate millions and millions of votes because of his personality. He's going to generate those votes because they can't stand the alternative.
Trump will make his first court appearance in December. If he is found guilty and still wins the election, there's nothing in the Constitution that would bar him from being commander-in-chief. While this case is unlikely to land Trump any jail time, other criminal investigations, including on his role in efforts to overturn the 2020 election results, could lead to more serious charges and potential imprisonment.
I don't know how one could be effective as president of the United States while being in a jail cell, but there is nothing in the Constitution that would keep somebody from being president of the United States and being incarcerated at the same time.
But elections are not decided only by personalities. Other than the economy, which is looking increasingly positive for Biden, the incumbent, there are the so-called wedge issues that motivate American voters.
Issues like immigration, crime, which are very important for Republicans, that motivate that base, or issues like social equality, women's reproductive rights, safe democracy, which are all issues that motivate Democrats. We saw those issues motivating voters in the midterms this last year, and we expect to see it in 2024 as well.
Biden has not officially announced he is running for re-election. He'll likely do it when he doesn't have to share the political spotlight with Trump. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
Fasting takes many forms, including time-honored way to show respect during periods of religious observance to get closer to your spiritual side. And VOA Health reporter Mkamiti Kibayasi has more. Hello, Mkamiti.
Hello, Esther. Methods of fasting range from avoiding all solid foods while drinking juices, smoothies, and broths to taking in nothing but water. During this cycle, some people lose or gain weight. To learn more about fasting, I'm joined live via Skype by Sophia Mwakio, a nutritionist from Mombasa, Kenya. Sophia, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Committee. Hi.
Hi. What to eat to break a fast to keep from negating the positive benefit of fasting?
When you're breaking your fast, what you really want to do is make sure that you firstly hydrate a lot and to eat food that is healthy. So what you want to avoid is generally any food that has a lot of sugar in it, because it will dehydrate you. And also you want to avoid food that is highly refined, because that is a lot of calories that will take away the positive effects that is gained during the caloric insufficiency that is during the fasting period. So you want to avoid foods with a lot of sugar, foods with a lot of salt, highly processed foods, and you want to keep your food very natural, hydrating, and with a lot of fiber. Yeah.
And what to avoid when breaking a fast despite the general health benefits?
You must definitely want to avoid eating very spicy food during breaking your fast. You want to keep your food as neutral as possible. Spicy food is good indeed, but during breaking your fast, you want to avoid that because you want to create a warm environment for your gut. Yeah, and we also want to avoid cold beverages and go for warmer stuff, even if you are living in very hot environments. And you also must definitely want to avoid eating a lot of food. You do not want to go to the extent of covering your daily caloric intake, which is usually about 2,000 kilocalories. So you just want to get around 800, which is just one meal or let's say 2 light meals. So not too much.
And Sophia, can you explain the difference between intermittent fasting and fasting?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say religious fasting is almost a type of intermittent fasting because it is within a certain time period. Yeah. Intermittent fasting is where you restrict feeding during a certain time period and then you feed in a different time period. So the most popular being most people fasting for close to 16 hours and eating for 8 hours. So when it comes to religious fasting, the physiology of it is the same because you get the same benefits, but you're only doing it for a different reason, which is mostly spiritual, to get closer to God and things like that. But it's mostly the same because of the time restriction, caloric restriction. And in intermittent fasting, there could be other things that are allowed. Let's say, like in the Islam fasting, we don't even drink water during our fast. It's a dry fast. But in the intermittent fasting, you can have 0 calorie or very low calorie foods like celery, juices, and coffee, tea. But during our fast, we don't drink anything at all. It's 0 calorie completely.
Sophia, thank you for joining us on Africa 54. That was Sophia Moikio, a nutritionist from Mombasa, Kenya. Back to you, Esther.
And thanks, Mkamiti. Be sure to watch Africa 54's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.